as you know, we have been voting in Switzerland for the EID, right? This has been, I mean, for I guess all of you, this has been a nightmare, right? We're really trembling that day, looking at the results, and we are thinking like, is this a serious thing? Are people really so undecided about whether to vote or not to vote for the EID? So this was really a nightmare. And today we have Alessandro who will tell us a bit about the EID and what the EID could actually mean in the context of corporate environments. So please join me in giving a warm applause to Alessandro.
So, hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here and tell you a little bit more about the way I look at the EID. And before we do that, let me just share a little bit of context about myself and the projects I'm involved in. I think that will actually help you understand better as well where some of these thoughts are actually coming from. I'm representing a company called Papers I co-founded in 2010, and what we ended up doing was actually create these ventures that we would then spin off as own entities with the focus on impactful products, which for us actually meant to leverage the knowledge that we have in mobile security to then have real impact with that. So the expertise is in mobile security, confidential computing, and enterprise authentication. Now this is all very, very abstract. The actual project that I'm mostly involved in at the moment is a project called, and I mean, all of the stuff that we do is really revolving around this device that you're carrying around in your pocket and interact with every day. The project that I'm mostly involved in today is actually called Accurist, and I won't go into the details, but ultimately it allows someone to upcycle their mobile device and turn it into a confidential compute unit. And how that looks in practice is like this. So you see, we put smartphones in places that they were maybe not meant to be and leverage then that knowledge to do things with this, like for instance, resilience testing. The platform is then leveraged for that. But where the context for this specific presentation is coming from is actually from the Hypergate kind of corner, which is a tool to allow enterprises with very high kind of security standards to regain control over their authentication. Because you have this constant push basically from the consumer that knows how to use apps and wants to use them also in the context of a workplace. And then on the other hand, you have the security team, the infrastructure team that needs to make sure that they have full control. So ultimately, the two kind of coherent strategies that we've seen were to either say, look, security is none of our concern. We hand this all over to the cloud, and they will offer this service to us and this infrastructure, meaning that we completely lose control, or say, no, we actually want to reduce the exposure to the cloud, keep everything on premise, gain full control, but offer a slightly worse user experience. And just to share the context, this is exactly where then Hypergate came into play. But today is not about Hypergate per se, but just to share where these thoughts are actually coming from. So what we've seen over the years is that the infrastructure changed from an idea where the enterprise is just a network, and you had basically already an elevated trust state in that network by being just located inside that network. Everything that was outside the network was really, really insecure, and you basically just needed to protect the perimeter, and you would control whatever comes in and basically goes out. So one of kind of the evolutions to accommodate this new mobile workplace was then to say, you know what, let's just extend the concept of what is our perimeter by having a virtual private network, and then just include those devices through the VPN, and then they can mimic being inside this network. With the evolution of the workplace, another evolution took place as well, and this is the identity evolution, right? So we went from having these large Active Directory servers that would scale really, really well for many, many employees, leveraging the Kerberos authentication, to now something that looks more like this, where you basically hand out your crown jewels, your identity, to Microsoft. They provide it as a cloud service. But what you get in return is the convenience of having great user experience with basically all the apps, a very native experience, and you can start integrating all of these other components into it, just like they were apps. So you see here also the on-premises and legacy apps would just come in as just an additional service, right? Now, obviously, this is very, very convenient, but we're talking about resilience here. And if we take a look at a cloud and a cloud provider, it's nothing else than basically somebody else providing you with their machines, with their computers. And this has been very, very convenient and very, very attractive, so much so that by now over 60% of the cloud providers are there's just 5 that control over 60% of the market. They became also very interesting for mass surveillance because basically all the data is there. Why go somewhere else? And really pose a risk for supply chain as a whole. They have become entire geopolitical actors that can shape power balances and can ultimately also be weaponized, and that comes at a risk. There's a couple of risks that are more on the technical side, like you lose resilience by design if you just centralize everything with a single cloud provider, but you also lose the ownership over your data, because on one hand, the cloud provider has full access. On the other hand, the endless list of suppliers have some access. And then, obviously, the governments, where these have their headquarters in, have full access. So, how does that look in practice? There is, for instance, here an example of how this has been weaponized for this international criminal court prosecutor. They basically just shut down their email services because Trump specifically was not so much pleased with the investigations that he was doing. Obviously, Microsoft did not take any sort of stance in this, but and what you can also see is that the Swiss then stepped in and reestablished a service. But this shows you how ultimately in this world of also economic and trade wars, this becomes more and more a weapon that can be used against you, right? The other one is just a purely technical one, the Amazon downtime from last week, where basically, there was a failure. And because many services build on top of this, basically half of the internet was no longer really usable. So where do we go from here? I think that if you want to get back and regain that resilience, you have to rethink the workplace as basically putting the human in the center, and the human with their devices and their identity then authenticate individually with these services out there. And this is where ultimately also the EID comes into play, because with the EID, and I don't know how familiar you are with what has been proposed, you're basically leveraging the secure elements of the mobile device that you carry around to perform self-custody over your credentials. And it's a full digital representation of your Swiss ID. The system looks a little bit like this, where you have the holder and the wallet in the center. And this holder then asks for the credentials by the issuer. Everything is completely cryptographically signed. So you get your credentials, you store them in the secure element of the device. And a neat, nice little thing that comes out of this is that you can do both physical kind of verifications by communicating over the Bluetooth LE channel, or also then digital, where you just have a verification where you hand over HTTP or whatever your credentials. So in summary, these are the things that I want to highlight in this presentation. The EID has been built on quite open standards, which I was very pleased to see, and heavily leverages the mobile device on that side. One of the main pushbacks around the topic of EID was actually the privacy aspect. Because people said, hey, what if I now authenticate and prove to, well, let's say that I purchase cigarettes online, now I can prove that I'm over 18 or over 16, and then the minute after I start authenticating with my health insurance, right? What if these collude and start sharing information? This is basically where this selective disclosure web token comes into play, where you get from the issuer a bunch of properties, credentials, and then you, as a owner of that credential, can disclose whatever you want to disclose. And instead of leveraging rather new and untested technology like ZK proofs, what has been done here is basically go a more pragmatic way and then just offer things like more properties that seem redundant, but actually disclose less information. What I mean by that is, instead of just having the birth date in here to prove whether you're over 18 or not, there are also flags to prove whether you are over a certain threshold that matters. How the flow works is you receive from the issuer two representations that are signed. One which is with all the plain text payload in it, and one which has the claims. And the claims are basically just a hash of the actual content. And with this hash, you can then after say, I want to just disclose the expiry date. And when you do disclose the expiry date, in this case, there in the disclosure fields, you prove to the other party that A, you are in possession of this credential, and B, that you actually know what was behind that hash, because ultimately that is nothing else than a triplet disguised as a base 64. To make sure that you cannot be linked with your signature between the various verifiers, they use a concept which is a ephemeral key, where you don't reuse the same key with other verifiers. So basically you have one key per verifier, and then you lose entirely the linkability. So the second aspect of the EID tech stack that I wanted to highlight, obviously, is the mobile aspect. And you might wonder as well why mobile is suited for such a use case. And the reality of things is that the mobile is by far the most secure device that the consumer has, and it's the most personal device. And the reason is simple. When mobile operating systems were developed, they did not need to support legacy executables, so they could be built up from the ground with a new design. And this new design has things in there like application sandboxing, and also all and every installation happens with a executable which is signed. Now, because of this root of trust of the developer signing the executable, you can then build on top things like only that specific executable with that specific UID can access a specific entry in the secure element. If someone installs an update which is with, let's say, another signature, first of all, the operating system would block you. But second, if you uninstall it and reinstall the new one, that new signature receives a new UID, so they no longer get access to the secure element. But there is a little bit of caveat to that, because Android as well as Apple have now changed a little bit the whole system, and no longer it's just the developer that has the signing key, but you're actually handing over the signing key for the executable to Google and to Apple. Now, for Google, it used to be different, but then at some point they changed that, where now you really have to also hand over that key. For Apple, it was always like that. Ultimately, it's Apple that signs the executable for that iPhone. So one little issue with that is that ultimately you give the ultimate root of trust to the distributors of the applications. Now, getting back to the employee onboarding case, traditionally how this works for an enterprise is that you show up with your identification document. This gets checked manually, and then basically you start getting a badge, which then allows you to set certificate and passwords, which sometimes is even with your colleagues, right? You have 2 smart cards that you put in, and then a colleague basically says, now you're allowed to access that. And then ultimately you start getting access to the enterprise with your workstation. EID allows us to streamline this process. So on one hand, you can completely replace the KYC flow, because you're using the ultimate KYC flow, which is the issuer of your identity card. This comes in handy because, yes, there are KYC providers already today, but the reality of things is that if you use them, usually it's someone in a very low wage country that is checking your ID on that side. But the other thing is also you can completely replace login credentials so that the employee no longer needs username and passwords. They can just sign cryptographically with their EID. And this can be used cross-device or also for physical and digital access. And then the flow ultimately becomes way more streamlined, where you onboard and provision the device leveraging the single EID that you have on that side. There is another aspect to this. Whenever you hire today a remote job, then people will apply from North Korea, actually, but they say that they live in Switzerland. And you just end up in an interview process where you think you're talking to maybe someone that is located in Switzerland, but in reality it's someone from North Korea. We already had like 3 such cases, and it's actually quite widespread. And with the EID, you're actually able to prove that this is indeed someone living in Switzerland. It can be also as sophisticated as getting even face swaps in this specific case. All right, so opportunities. On one hand, the whole phishing aspect can be solved through this because of the cryptographic system that you have. So the security can be increased. On the other hand, you are able to streamline entire processes by leveraging the KYC already provided by the state. And if you want so, now you can even start offloading some of the trust infrastructure to the state because it is set up in a very scalable way where you don't have to have an interactive connection with the issuer of the credential to verify said credentials. On the risk side, on the other hand, is that you offload entirely the security to the user. And I don't know how many in here are familiar with digital assets, cryptocurrencies, and so on and so forth. There it's a similar kind of problem statement where the user needs to be doing and performing self-custody, and if they lose the credentials, they basically lose the digital assets. Here it's a little bit less dramatic because you can just ask a new ID, but still you need to be in charge of storing and managing those credentials. And the openness of EID, which I personally love, also means that you will have different implementations of the holder wallet, which means that you have different security levels in there as well. And the user will just choose whatever is most convenient, and whatever is most convenient does not necessarily mean that it is the most secure. The other thing is the mobile platform vendors are effectively becoming the new trust anchor in this case, because if they want, and I'm not saying that they want, but if they want, they could potentially just push an update which is signed completely in the way the device would expect it, and then extract and decrypt stuff on the device, right? The other thing is now we moved from the cloud being a central target to EID being a central target. I think, yeah. And a very practical one is that not everyone will actually have an EID. So you will have to also consider fallbacks to other flows, which is a harsh reality, but you have to deal with. Cool. This brings me to my last slide, and just summary. I hope I managed to basically tell you that the modern workplace really puts the identity in the center, and the mobile device plays a central role in that. And initiatives like EID go beyond just checking whether you're allowed or you're 18 or plus, and can be used to streamline processes on that side. And the openness of the EID, I think, is actually quite exciting, but as well comes with some risks. Thank you very much for listening in. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alessandro. We have time for one or two questions. We have a microphone. Yes, in the second row, please.
Hello. Hi, hello. Thank you very much, Alessandro, for this speech. One question. I think there will be a lot of questions, but one question. Taking, for example, Lithuania or Estonia in Spain, 2017, when they had to fall back in this case because they didn't know if their crypto was safe enough or not. What do you think for this case? Do we need a plan B for that? Do we need, and not when we have the first problem, the first incident, do we have from the beginning on a plan B to have? And the second question is, I think there is a lot of win on that. On the other hand, a common cause failure A common cause failure would then put us in a situation where we don't have just a single problem somewhere, but a huge problem everywhere. How do you think can that be managed?
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely we need a plan B. Even thinking about the fact that now quantum computers are on the rise that are able to weaken the security of, now specifically, in this case, we have ECDSA with P256, right, which is not quantum resistant. So absolutely, like already today, it's clear that we cannot run with just that algorithm forever. But the standard actually is quite nice and allows you to change which algorithms to use in that case. And look, in the end, think about it this way. It's whoever is currently issuing the passport has also plays a central role, right? And this is now just a little bit amplified with making this passport also digital. But yeah, this is the risk that you have here. I think, however, the benefits that you gain from it are just way more than yeah, what risk you have to assume. Yeah.
More questions. Third row.
Well, how confident are you that the government is able to protect the database properly? I mean, once breached, this is a big failure point, and then we have to go back to other processes. And so how do you plan to recover from that? Or is there a plan to recover from such a situation? Right.
So first of all, let me say that I'm not personally involved in the EID project, but the and I do feel your worry on that side. I think, however, that the standard and the way that issuers can work independently is well designed, just from a software architecture and design perspective. Ultimately, it's the same thing as yeah. We all rely on Swiss francs, right? And if someone is able to just turn on the printing machine longer, then all of that also collapses. I think you need somehow to have the trust that people involved in the project understand the importance of security in this aspect. And by looking just now on the design, I'm more confident than I was before looking at the design. So I think that, yeah, that's what I can say.
So you're trusting the pilot, as we have heard in today's keynote?
Yes, I think it's yeah. I was pleasantly surprised, and I looked at it also from a critical. It's not perfect, but whenever you want to ship something, you cannot wait for perfection. Yeah.
Great. One more question. Fifth row.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. You promoted one idea about replacing the login credentials with the EID. And I wonder, looking at passkeys and how that is supported by all of the mobile device producers, how that's incorporated, what are the gained security properties that you're promoting with trusting the wallet or device thing and having the root trust with the government instead of the mobile device?
Well, now you have both. Because so the concept is very similar to the passkeys, actually. And the credentials are, on one hand, yes, with the issuer. So there is some trust there, but ultimately they land in your wallet and then you trust the security of the mobile, right? On that side. And what is better than, let's say, a password is that a potential attacker who would want to phish you does no longer need your credentials, but actually your physical device and the access to the secure element, which ultimately is also secured by biometrics, right? So you're putting full trust in the mobile security of, yeah, that is just something that we have to accept, but I think it is better than credentials, definitely.
So I just hear that the other room is delayed, so we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So there was one in the back. Our staff needs to be running. Great.
Thank you so much. I have the question because the phone actually, it's not something that belongs to you. It belongs to Apple or to Google, and Apple Store, it's not something that belongs to Switzerland. So you mentioned money as something that's similar to AID, but actually not, because in case of money, it's your wallet. And in case of AID, phone is not yours. So my question is, if, for example, a person don't have phone or don't want to have, let's say, Apple Store, what's the exit from this situation?
I think that you will have to consider, regardless of which flow you design this case, because I mean, we also have a population that does not have this kind of technologies, like children or maybe also elderly people. So I think you always need to have a kind of second flow for that case. Like you cannot solely rely on this, which is a pity, because if you could streamline a lot, but you cannot. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. There was one more question in the front. No, the question is gone. Question is answered. That's great. I think then is the time to give an applause to Alessandro. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.